The world is changing extremely fast right now, in ways that can feel both exciting and overwhelming. So, how do we find balance in all of this? I'm Stephanie van Bismarck, activist, author, and digital educator. Welcome to my podcast, where each week I sit down with some of the world's best thinkers, trailblazers, and extraordinary people to find ways to help us all thrive and answer the big question, how do we manage? Hi, and welcome back. I recorded this compelling and important conversation with someone who's reshaping the digital world for future generations in early July 2025. Baroness Beeban Kidron began her career as a filmmaker. She won 3 BAFTAs for her 1989 adaptation of Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, and also directed the second Bridget Jones movie, Edge of Reason, so that immediately made me a superfan. But in 2013, she went on to make a groundbreaking documentary in real life about the safety of our children online, before founding the 5 Rights Foundation, a leading global force advocating for children's rights in the digital world. She is now a crossbench member of the UK House of Lords and has been instrumental in the creation of the UK's Online Safety Act and the Age-Appropriate Design Code. When this conversation was recorded, the Online Safety Act was just weeks from being updated to include a new series of child safety rules for social media, search, and gaming apps and websites. Her work has had global impact, and what happens in Europe and the UK will shape the future of online safety for children everywhere. There was so much to talk to her about, from her love of storytelling to how her work really incorporates the voices of children and what the Online Safety Act has actually achieved. And for that reason, we've decided to split this episode in 2. So you'll be able to hear part 1 today, and part 2 will be released next week. I really hope you'll take as much from this conversation as I did. Baroness Kidron, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
There's so much to talk about. I don't really know where to start, but I really wanted to start a little bit going back because I know you early fell in love with storytelling and movie making. And I know because I have to mention it because I was a huge fan of those epic movies that you even directed, one of the Bridget Jones movies. Which
did.
up until today, I absolutely adore. So tell me a little bit how that started, that love for storytelling.
So I sort of came upon film by accident. I started off as a photographer when I was very, very young.
Yeah.
I had a childhood illness. Someone lent me a camera as a sort of, why don't you do this while you can't play, can't speak, things like that. And I started taking pictures, and I found taking photographs gave me a view of the world that was at once very intensely looking at it, but being on one side of it. And one of the things that I remember thinking as a very young child, I mean, we're talking about 10, 11, I thought you can always tell who's powerful in a room. Mm-hmm. From watching how the body language, who speaks, who waits, and so on, and how they sort of arrange themselves. And I think that was sort of my very first insight, both into politics and into movie making, when I was very young. And so I was always sort of cast as the observer and the storyteller. And remember, I was a director, not a writer. So I worked with other people's stories to try and manifest them. And some of them, like Tu Wong Fu or Bridget Jones, were funny and sort of wry about human behavior. And some of them were really, really brutal and hard-hitting, like, documentaries about sex work or, dramas about loss. So one way and another, I sort of fell in love with looking at the world. And it was accidental then that I went into politics because I was just looking at the world so intensely. And at a certain point I was, well, we have to do better than this. It's not okay to record the world. It's not okay to tell stories about the world. You actually have to get to grips with it and change some things in real life. And that's kind of how my journey took this absolutely extraordinary kind of turn that no one, including me, could have anticipated.
No, I mean, it's very rare. I've met a couple of politicians in my life, and it's very rare to have like a successful movie maker, director, all of a sudden turning into politics. I mean, we all, I think we all wish that we had more of those people like you out there who were, really convinced that things need to change and come from an outside perspective.
It's very kind of you to say that, and I always have this. People say, "Why did you do it? Why did you do it?" And I think two things always occur to me. One is, to say the joke, which is when I go for dinner now and they say, "What do you do?" and I say, "Oh, well, I'm into data protection, AI, online safety." They kind of look the other way. When I used to say, "Oh, I'm a movie director," they lean in.
Of course.
So a lot of people think I'm absolutely crazy, but I think what has surprised me is how many transferable skills there are. And the biggest thing is, when I talk to my colleagues who've been politicians or sort of adjacent to politics for a lot longer than I have, and they go, "Why is it that you're able to be impactful?" And I go, "Do you know what? I think in the end, it's because as a filmmaker, you have a blank screen and there is no such thing as not finishing the movie, no such thing as not getting to Times Square and opening the movie on a particular day or Leicester Square. The show does go on and you put all your effort in and everyone around you puts their effort into making something happen. And so this idea that we might be in a situation which is somehow, inhospitable to change, doesn't occur to me that I'm not going to win some change because all my training is to get the thing done.
I love that. We need more of that worldwide. Was there something in your making movies, being behind a camera, having that voice, seeing pictures, where you started understanding, okay, there is really stuff that is going on, where you understood, okay, there's so much going wrong because the camera, we're all talking pictures, we're talking the movies, everything is so closely linked to, right, to what we're dealing now and protecting children online. Was there something that you sort of realized, a moment or a movie or something where you said, oh God?
100%. 100% there was. So in between making sort of Hollywood stroke, UK cinema movies, I always used to make a documentary just for my own interest.
Yeah.
And in 2012, when a smartphone became a price point that an adult might give it to a child, I saw all the children around different. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll make a documentary about that. So I started making a documentary film. It was called In Real Life. And I spent hundreds of hours with UK teenagers in their rooms. And if they were gaming, I was filming that. If they were watching porn, I was filming that. I hasten to add that everybody's parents knew that I was filming and everybody had given permission for what I did.
Very important to mention that these days.
Very important to mention it. But, and if they were going to meetups and if they were falling in love, whatever they were doing, good, bad, or ugly, I was filming it. And somewhere along the line, so I then went on a journey following the pipes from these bedrooms, down to Cornwall, under the ground, up in New York, all the way through the Midwest. I filmed in one of Facebook's early data centers. It was like blinking lights and all of that. All the way to Silicon Valley. And somewhere on the journey, I realized that we had done a generational injustice because it had been designed, and this is what the experts who I was interviewing on my journey, they would all say, well, the great thing about the internet is there are no gatekeepers and all users will be equal. And I just thought, whoa, if all users are equal, then we're treating a child as if they're adult. And that is actually regressive, not progressive, in the way that people were suggesting it was. And I've never made another film since. That was when I took this incredible turn, because I tried to tell people I had quite a good phone book. I was in the Lords already. I was, as a movie director, I was connected into various networks of people. No one was interested.
There's something that always struck me, because I've been working in that field also in sort of the early 2000s when it started. Sadly, some of the things I'm still saying today haven't actually changed. But for me, it was always striking how we, as a full world population, as adults, could take on something that came across so powerful, so massive, and yes, so glitzy and glammy and fantastic. And we took it on in this sort of never-ending playground. And I guess the people who did it at that time didn't think about it so much either. But it's very rare in history, I'd say, if I try to think back, where we have I always make these examples with the powerful tools, where something comes to the market and it's massively powerful, where people haven't said, yeah, but like every sharp knife, every sharp tool, every weapon that is used to do something good on one hand always comes with a side of a lot of shadows and potential harm. Up until today, it's astonishing to me that we somewhere got, we completely shut that out. And the sort of Silicon Valley gold rush, we're all going to be multimillionaires. I don't even know what it actually was that we got swept over like a wave.
I do agree that probably in the beginning it was not deliberate, but I think there is a connection between what happened in Silicon Valley and what happened in the 80s with the deregulation of the city. Mm-hmm. So you actually had, there was a decision to let money make money from money, and then there was a lot of money around. And so when this new technology came, woof, all that money found a place. And it happened at the same time that of the whole globalization project. And so there was then allowed to spread across the world without all the traditional barriers. And it's not even barriers, because we don't want to stop technology. It's without the stickiness that says, hang on a minute, this is our culture, these are our morals, here are our laws. And they were given a pass. And that pass made them very, very big, very, very quickly. Yeah. And that meant that by the time the majority of people understood there was a problem, they were monstrous. And so I think there is this big kind of tectonic plates of how we have allowed the world to come and who was in charge, that they have benefited from. I don't think it was their idea. No. I think they were the technology of our time. Because, we have seen historically, whether it was the railways, whether it was airlines, whether it was shipping, whether it was, other, even finance before we deregulated, we did get together, nuclear, bioweapons. I mean, there's so many different versions of, oh dear, this is a social issue. Let's put some thought around how we deal with that. Yeah. And then suddenly we don't. Yeah. Whoa. And so I think your sort of querying it is absolutely right, because it did meet this very, very funny sort of political economic moment. And I think since that time, it has been willful, deliberate, and billions, literally billions, have been spent keeping the status quo. Yeah. And so people like you, like me, like our colleagues who are in the trenches, we are all David and they are Goliath. Yeah. And I can only hope that David will prevail, because that's the story. But it is extraordinary. And I do remember my husband saying to me very shortly after I'd made the film, and once I started campaigning instead of filmmaking, he sat me down and he said, listen, I just want to say I married a very successful film director, and it now appears to be one middle-aged woman against Silicon Valley. And he goes, are you sure? Literally. And I went, pain of consciousness. What can you do? And he went, that's my girl. And that was it. We never discussed it again. Yeah. It has been this way since, for the last 13, 14 years.
I love that. I mean, What came first, the politics or then founding your fabulous Five Rights Foundation?
The politics, what happened first was, so I looked for certain, I thought, well, okay, no one wants to deal with this. What shall I do? In that way that one does start walking.
Yeah.
And I decided that rather than sort of reinventing the wheel, that I should look for existing levers. So the first thing I actually tried to do, and it took quite a long time, but we did do it eventually, is we offered to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, the UN committee, to draft a general comment about how children's rights apply to the digital world. Because at that time, and it's hard to believe it, but at that time, no one thought they did. No one was considering digital as being an environment. And I was thinking, hang on a minute, if a farm in India, a school in Indonesia, and a shop in, Berlin, if children's rights apply whatever the environment, why not this virtual world? And it took a little time to persuade the committee. It then took quite a long time to actually draft it, and we had to do all sorts of things, including, because it's an international document, we interviewed and did workshops with over 1,000 children in 28 countries so that they had their voice within the general comment. Somewhere in the middle of doing that, I then developed quite a global set of contacts, and in a similar period, almost like side by side, I think, we had some data law coming into the House of Lords. And I thought, privacy, data privacy. If you can't use a child's data, then you can't abuse a child's data. If a child is private, then you have less opportunity to attach them and addict them and send them stuff that they shouldn't have, etc. And I use that vehicle also to create something called the Age Appropriate Design Code, which was the first piece of legislation. Somewhere, while all of this is happening, people start ringing and writing and emailing and saying, can you help us X? Can you help Y? And I suddenly realized that I had created a situation where one person was completely inadequate to the task, and I set up Five Rights. And to this day, my colleagues at Five Rights, act as a SWAT team for different places in the world that are trying to do the things that we've been able to do in the UK. They mirror some of the things that are better in Australia, at the African Union, in Indonesia, and so on, Canada, and the European Union as well. And they are based sort of all over the world. But what we do is act as a intelligence swap for the best that is happening. And we commission research, and we draft legislation, and we critique other people's legislation. So we try and help everybody to get to a level that they want to get to in their context, but with the similar attitude, so that actually we raise the floor around the world. The idea is that we all raise the floor. None of us are going to dictate what the ceiling is. The digital world could be marvelous. It could be more marvelous than I can imagine, but we just want a floor in which they can't behave badly to children.
Yeah, I mean, the global collaboration, this is so very important, and yet it's happening fragmented, right? I mean, so the Europeans are getting there. But what I really love about what you do also, what I've always been also advocating for, is we all talk about the younger generation as if they weren't in the room. It's like we always talk about them, what they're doing and how stupid they're supposedly getting and all these kind of things. But very rarely we're talking with them. You don't do that. You believe in listening to them. Tell me about that.
Do you know what? If I gave up everything else in my life, I would not give up talking to the children. It is amazing.
I'm like with you, yeah.
It's amazing. Basically, from the beginning, I just thought, well, who are we talking about? Kids. We must talk to kids to see how they experience it.
Yeah, how they think.
Yeah. And I also sat very early on. I had what I now consider a fortunate experience of kept on going to meetings in which I saw that they were saying, kids think this, kids think this, kids think this. And I thought, that doesn't sound like what a child would think. And it turned out that a lot of the consultations with children were happening with the adults saying, what do you think about X? And somehow the question determined the possible answers. And I thought, well, this is no good. What we have to do is talk to children about their experience. But I thought, how do we do that in a really proper, equitable way without actually determining what they thought they were supposed to say? Anyway, long and short of it is, I commissioned a piece of research from Leeds and Nottingham University, who had been doing work in some failed states on women who had suffered violence. And what they did was deliberative juries. So what they did was they say, you do realize you have the right to this, that, and the other. And the woman will say, no, I didn't necessarily know that, but this is my experience. And they go, well, in that case, you also could consider this or that. And so it was a world in which you teach and you learn and you teach according to what people are saying. And it's like a deliberate. Anyway, we developed these deliberative juries for children. And so from the very beginning, what we did at Five Rights, what I've done in legislation, what we did in the general comment at the UN, everything, even what we did with the IEEE, which is the engineering standards organization about technical standards, everything has gone through this process of young people being asked what their experience was and being taught their rights and about the context in which their experience was happening. And it's just been an incredible privilege because as I've worked out how to do this over the years, and I've done hundreds of them now, what's also happened is I have said in the last 15 minutes of any meeting, I say, do me a favor, go away for 15 minutes, come back and tell me if you had one chance to change whatever we're talking about, how would you change it? And I have literally sat in the room or been online while young people have come up with things that I have then been able to put into legislation. And they have given me a profound understanding. So, for example, I remember years ago a bunch of kids who I had taken to meet the CEO of Snap saying, we don't like this thing about the best friend. Yeah?
I've heard that many times,
by
the way. It
creates grief.
Yeah.
Yeah? And they start telling him. And he goes, but I did it because then my wife knows I love him back. And they go, well, it doesn't work for us because we have to be on all the time creating our best friend. And then look, we wake up in the morning and we're no longer the best friend. So we're up all night, et cetera, et cetera. I've watched an 8-year-old invent two-factor authentication before it was a regular thing in the world. I see them, they go, just turn off the comments, just default, no comments. Yeah. Because it's all in the comments that they brutalize and bully us, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think what my attitude is a sort of a legal, stroke technical, stroke political wraparound this view of the kids, which is we want this stuff. We like it, we need it, but we need it to be kinder, less demanding, less toxic, more age appropriate, and easier to leave. That's their view.
Yes.
I'm all with their view.
Oh, me too. Me too. It's just our responsibility to take that serious and take that responsibility as adults of a generation to protect them. And that's what I've often heard, where young people have come up to me, where we did, I don't know, seminars in schools and stuff, and sometimes even on boring things like legal components of what am I allowed to post, who belongs the picture,
Yeah.
whose right is at the picture. But then they say, quite frankly, you have left us alone.
Oh, yes.
We are not born with the ability to handle all of this. It's you who's not teaching us. It's you who is not putting the legal framework into action. It's like, how have we come to that point where we think, that they can figure it out on their own because they're born with it. We're not. It's like, and that is so wrong.
I just really want to sort of, if I might, violently agree with you about what you just said.
Violently agree with me.
Violently agree with you. How dare we say that this technology is really important for the jobs of the future? This technology is really important for growth. This technology is really going to replace all known sort of organizational systems of society, and then go, but kids, you're on your own.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's so preposterous, that view. And an academic friend of mine a few years ago called it responsibilizing children.
Mm.
And I find that a really useful thing. So when I meet something, when someone says, oh, we've got a really good idea, this will make them safe, or this will do this or that, I always ask myself, is it responsibilizing children? And I even say that to the parents who are listening to this podcast, that actually you must not be frightened to parent. That's quite different from parental controls.
Yes.
I'm saying you must not be frightened to parent. Do not responsibilize your kids, because I think people miss the point that educating children and preparing children for the world and is a societal responsibility.
Yeah, a big one.
Making products safe is a government duty.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And a corporate responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah? And why are we muddled up here?
Yeah.
I just don't think it's right. So we all have a role to play, but let's make sure we're playing the right role. And as regards children, they do also have a responsibility, to be collegiate, inclusive, kind, all those things that we would like our children to be. But they really, really should not be responsibilized to making products safe.
I think it's a very important point, again, to pick up on that parenting, because being a parent is not the easy job. Right? And now sometimes you see these tendencies these days, I see them a lot, where parenting has become more of a, I'm trying to be the best friend of my child kind of thing. Yeah. And that unfortunately often doesn't go the right way. Just because your child is at home in their room, they're not safe. Mm-hmm. And, in the earlier days, we learned them how to ride a bike, and it takes, I don't know how long, a few weeks perhaps. Mm-hmm. So us as parents to just think just because they're at home, it gives that false sense of security, is just so wrong. And there is this massive responsibility to parents. And yes, it is tough because we're already working and we're having so much load to really occupy ourselves with what's happening online, and to know where are they in that reality. If it's not mine, at least it's my responsibility to occupy myself with theirs, because it's what's surrounding them, and this is what how they communicate these days, and all of these kind of things. So you can really start also in the small, because like at home we have to make sure I know what you're doing, I understand what you're doing. I might not agree always, but I have to be that open, safe space.
I mean, listen, you're absolutely right, and I think it is a bit confusing, and it's made more confusing by these clashing sort of pieces of information. Like, some of the parents say to me, and I just wrestled it out of their hands, and then it turns out that school requires them to upload something, so and then they're back on, and then we start all over again. I think there are a lot of conflicts. I think basically, yes, I think both parents have to parent, and as you say, There are things to do in relation to technology, just like riding a bike, walking to school, negotiating friendships, having sleepovers. All of those things come with rules. All of those things will have a level of transgression. That's called growing up, finding the boundary. And if a parent doesn't have any boundaries, you're not helping your child grow up. Having said that, there's a sort of a reverse thing where, at the moment we're trying to get something through Parliament to say bell to bell, phones not in schools, and one of the big pushbacks is parents saying, but I need to get hold of my child. Well, I really don't know why you have to get hold of your child during the school day. I
don't understand it either.
Generations of people manage to grow up without their parents talking to them through the school day. And if, no one's saying they shouldn't have a phone later, I also have to keep on saying to parents, that I understand your fear, but to be honest, you knowing where your child is exactly, doesn't make them safer.
Exactly. Absolutely not.
And I have some very horrible examples of that, which I won't bother with right now. But it just simply doesn't make them safer. And indeed, it can make them less safe if they've got a fancy phone and someone comes after it. So, there are so many things to unpick. But bottom line is, that in my endless workshops with children, what do they say?
Well, they're saying what they actually like when their phone is not around.
Yeah,
at least
but they say something even worse.
Tell me.
Parents, put your phone down.
Oh my God, absolutely.
Number one thing, children said to me,
so right.
whether they are 8 or 17, they go, all I know is my parent is a hypocrite. All I know is they're not looking at me in the eye. All I know is that I don't have their attention. All I know that my father's working, my mother's this, my this and that. I cannot tell you. I get
I'm not important.
A wall of I am not attended to.
Yeah.
And in that distraction, they seek other things. Now, I'm not blaming parents. I'm just saying, here's one thing you can do. If I had $1 or £1 or yen for every parent who's written to me at the House of Lords saying, what can I do? And none of them have thought, I'll put my own phone down.
Baroness Beeban Kidron, an instrumental force for good and digital safety. And to hear more of that conversation, particularly about the development and the implementation of the UK Online Safety Act, be sure to listen to the next episode of How Do We Manage?
But the fact that it survived that amount of political tumult, and it was the only thing that survived that amount of political tumult, is because people grew in that period to understand the importance of it. We can design a digital world that understands or responds to the needs of childhood. If you feel that they are not treating children right, then don't use them.
Yeah.
And if you can be bothered, tell them that's why you're not using them. I like technology, I use technology, you can create with technology, but there is something very profound about being able to remember some things, experience things without the technology, because that is how you feed your imagination.